Hello, welcome to the October 22nd, 2024 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host of the live stream. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you could submit questions in advance by sending an email to clubcubase@steinberg.de, or you can just simply ask your question in the live chat field. When asking questions, if you could indicate which level of Cubase you're running, so if you're running Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, or other Steinberg programs, if you could let us know also which version, so if it's version 11, 12, 13, and which operating system, that information is always helpful. We should have a we should have a list of all the topics discussed in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field several hours after the live stream ends. It might be a little later than usual tonight, but we should have it late tonight so you could quickly navigate. And if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, there's over 34,000 topics. You could go to cubaseindex.com, and we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that website. We also want to give a special thanks to Agent K and Jazz Dude that serve as moderators for the live stream. They're not Steinberg employees, they just do it to make it a better community experience. So we appreciate all the things that they do. We also will give a special kudos to Jazz Dude for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord, which is a wonderful resource of information that's relevant for the Steinberg community. And so once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America, and I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I'm the host. I'm usually presenting from outside Washington, D.C. area. I'm actually traveling this week, and this is my first remote Club Cubase live stream, and we're at the Yamaha Audio Lab at Soundcheck in Nashville, Tennessee. So you may hear more bands playing in the background, some people popping in and out, cases going. So it may sound a little different than usual. So that's why. But we're wonderful. We're having kind of the grand opening celebration of the Yamaha Audio Lab tonight, and we'll be doing a Club Cubase in-person event here tomorrow night. So if you're in Nashville, you could just let me know if you want an invitation, and we'll be happy to send you one. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. All right, so first question is from Jaheen L. Price, who asks, greetings from Granada Hills. Thanks for the best over-the-shoulder live stream. I'm not able to copy my controller mapping from Nuendo to Cubase. It says M1 2020 Sequoia 16 gigabytes, and it's an APC 40 Mark II. So I guess if you want to get the MIDI remote script, so if we have various MIDI remotes, what you could do is when we go to like the script area, so we'll come right over here and go to scripts, try to, at this point, we could export the script just by clicking right here. So again, when we go to, we'll double click on the script, I guess for your APC 40 Mark II. And then once that's the kind of the script that we have edited, click on the settings icon right here. And then we could export. So we'll go to our scripts. And at this point, we could export your script. And then we could come right over here on your other computer, in your the other program, and choose to import the script. So once again, go to the MIDI remote page here, go to settings, scripts tab, export to script, and then import it, and that will automatically move it to the correct folder for you. All right, so we see from Roland Stuff, great to see you on. It says, hi Greg, I did a tempo detect on a guitar track and it was picked up the rhythm at twice the actual tempo. So when using the follow transport in Groove Agent, it's twice the speed it should be. And then can tempo detect be changed after the event? Thanks and greetings from Sussex, England. So let's say I want to do a tempo detection on this particular track here. So let's say, and if I put my metronome on, we can hear that the metronome is not aligned to the music, just kind of running completely independent. So I'm going to do a quick tempo detection. Go to my project menu. Let's choose tempo detection. We'll say analyze. And now Cubase has done a tempo detection. Let's see if we have a pickup note. So let's say our downbeat is going to be here. Sounds like we're... Now, before we do this, one of the things that you could do when you do the tempo detection, listen to it. And then if I wanted to divide by 2 or multiply by 2, we could do that within the tempo detection area. But if we didn't do that as we expected it, so I'm going to just, again, come over here. I'm just going to define where the downbeat is. So we'll say right at this bar. So now we'll have our tempo detection. But let's say, as in Roland's stuff case, he needs to, when he aligns it with his drum machine, he wants to do half the tempo. So I'm going to just go to the tempo track itself, right click, and we're going to say, let's select all of the events, and we could go to the project logical editor. Let's get to setup. We want to choose transform. We're going to say our media type is equal to tempo. And then I think if we go to trim, we could say divide by 2, or we could multiply by 0.5. So now our tempo, as soon as we come right over here, I'll hit apply, our tempo will now be halved for you. So if you wanted to do it after the fact and you didn't want to do a tempo detection again, you can go to the project logical editor, say transform media type is equal to tempo. So we're saying we want to change tempo events, and how do we want to change them? We're going to trim the tempo and we're going to divide it by 2, and that will give you half the speed. So let me know if that makes sense for your workflow. All right, let's move on to next question. All right, so we see Fly V checking in from Winnipeg. Great to see you on. We have Captenergy Music from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. We have Stefan from Sweden. All right, so Parabot 2. Hi, Greg. Is there a way to get guitar feedback, or do I have to record with an amp to pull this off? Thank you. So you can get feedback. I think, and I haven't tried this myself, but you may have to just simply, as you're recording, have speakers and monitor through speakers. And then at that point, if you're monitoring through the speakers, most people, if they're doing guitar feedback, would choose to mic up an amplifier. But you could mic up your studio monitors. I've seen people do that. And as you move the guitar pickups into the speakers, like your studio monitors, your studio speakers, you could capture the feedback and then just simply record that. But the feedback is actually going to be generated, with the basically from the microphone capturing the source of the speaker and then creating a feedback loop of that. So you would need to kind of record it from either a guitar amp as an audio track, or if you wanted to do it from like a guitar amp simulator, what you could do is just put a microphone on your studio speakers and record that to capture feedback. All right. Great to see Jazz Dude on. We see Matt Elston. We see Tim Weinheimer saying hello, Cubasers from Mission Viejo, California. All right. Okay, so reading through comments. All right, so we have WarU303 just saying evening to everyone. Glad to see you on. MH is just saying Cubase 14. So, we're not going to make an announcement probably until you'll see the announcement from Steinberg when it's ready. So, and as soon as it is released, we will do kind of a special Cubase 14 walkthrough. So, all right. All right, so we see this Ninja Scared just says, are we going to get stem separation in any future updates? I see Logic and now Studio One has it. So, we already kind of have it with the Spectral Layers, one that comes with your Cubase license that will allow you to do stem separate or to separate vocals from a particular file. But if we wanted to, and then if we want to do kind of it's probably the industry leading algorithm for separation is going to be the Spectral Layers Pro. So, so if you have that, we could do it directly inside of Cubase as well. I know that's an additional purchase if you wanted to do more instruments, but I think that you'll find that the quality is much higher. So when we want to do this, we'll just open up a project where I've done this already. So as we listen, and we go into our spectral layers here. Now if I want to just separate the drums, so even now with spectral layers, if I wanted to come here and say, okay, I want the vocals softer or louder, and now I could even just drag the vocal file over. Never meant to fall head over heels. So if I wanted to, now at this point, do different processing, we could do that. So I think, you'll see that Steinberg was the first DAW that offered any separation. But if you want kind of the highest quality separation, check out using it in conjunction with Spectral Layers. That's a phenomenal tool for that, and I think many people would agree it's the best algorithm for doing separation. So, all right, so we have from this Ninja Scared asks, feature request, can we get a feature that shows keyboardist what chords we are playing live? It's too small in the MIDI editor, and you can only see the chords after they've been recorded. So a lot of people may not know that you can see this in the MIDI editor. So when we do this, if we add a quick instrument track, and we'll just load up quick. So we'll go within the key editor here. So obviously you can, as we are, so we'll go over here to, so, as we want to, if we're in record, we could just come over here. I'll just solo this. And you could often see kind of the current chord display. I'll make sure to kind of pass that along as a feature request. But do you need to see it? Let me know the exact reason you need to see it bigger as you're playing it. Obviously we could come up to the chord track or chord pads, and if we wanted to add a chord track, we could just simply come here, and I think even if we go to record in the chord track, just mute that. So let's say so I guess it's not even recording, but we could just select a chord, and as we play, you could take the selected chord and see it right there. So I guess if you wanted to see one chord that was, if you just have this open, like as it's playing, you could just see whatever chord you play. If you just kind of create a dummy event, if you want to see it larger. But it's obviously where we could do the chord analysis from audio or MIDI afterwards. But if you wanted to kind of keep that, just keep, if you need to see it large and in real time, if you just double click here again, if I get the right tool, that would help. You could just keep this open, and as you're recording or playing, you could just play different chords from your controller and see the chords there. It may not be associated with the time, but you could do both at the same time. But regardless, I'll pass it on. All right. It's great to see Uno Memento from Finland and Benny from Sweden. All right, and we have Dallas LaRue checking in from Las Vegas again. Thanks for joining us. All right. So we see this Ninja Scare just says, thanks for all you do, Greg. So you're welcome. Thanks for being on the live stream and being part of the community. All right. Always wonderful to see Sable Winters from Northern California. Great to see you on. All right. So we see Conpa Pam ask one. Hi, Greg. I'm tuning in from Canada using Cubase 13 Pro along with the Focusrite Scarlett 2i2 interface. After a recent software update, I've been having trouble with my vocal recordings. It says, despite trying multiple configurations, the audio MIDI sounds are both being captured on this same track. Could you help me please figure out how to fix this? Thanks in advance. Okay, so if you are recording, so a lot of audio interfaces may have something called a loopback. And what the loopback is set for, and in different audio interfaces will have different terminology. So sometimes if you're plugged into input 1, a loopback is designed so that you could, if you were playing, let's say, a game and you wanted the audio of the game plus your microphone input to be transmitted if you were doing online gaming with someone. Loopback is a way of taking the audio from the game or from your DAW plus the microphone source and combining those so that you could send that particular audio out so that, you could yell at people while you play games with them and stuff. And we noticed that like my audio interface here, I have my IXO22, so I have it set up for DAW, but if I set it up for through, that would be like in loopback mode. So my guess is that it's taking the audio. You may want to investigate what the Focusrite software probably has something that will be like a streaming input versus a regular input. But I would guess that you have the streaming input, and you could check with the terminology that's being applied within the Focusrite control panel or mixer. But if you turn that off, because you should only be hearing, you should be able to hear your playback tracks and not record those. But if loopback or streaming is set on the audio interface, it's going to capture the audio from the DAW that's playing back in addition to your vocal. So I bet that's what is going on with you. So let me know, and maybe someone has a Focusrite interface, they could share what the name of that particular function is. That would be appreciated. All right, we have Robert Daisy Webb just saying, hi, Greg. Great. We have Gamer Lex saying hello. We have Home Studio World saying hi from Jordan. Thanks for joining us again. Okay. Sorry, my chat field jumped at me. Let me catch up. All right, so Roland Stuff says, that's great, Greg. Many thanks for the logical editor solution to changing tempo detection after the event. Yeah, so I remember setting that up for someone who wanted to play back lines very quickly at a slower tempo and speed up their audio MIDI performance. All right, so we have Mr. Dolly 67 sending greetings from Denmark. We have Mike Modern saying, says, hi, Greg. How can I be able to automatically copy and paste a different piano roll and make it look exactly like the patterns in the new piano roll? All right, so let's just say, let me switch projects here. Okay, so I'm not sure if if we want to do it at the piano roll level. So let's say if I just take, we have this event here, So let's say we have our piano. Let me synchronize the views here. Okay, so we can see that we have this data. So if I hold down my Alt or Option key, we could duplicate all of the events just like that. So this is how can I be able to automatically copy and paste a different piano roll, make it look exactly like the patterns in the new piano roll. So let's say if I come over here and I select all the notes and hit delete. So I could come right over here. I could copy. I'm going to do a Control or Command plus the letter A to select all. Control or Command plus the letter C to copy. And then I'm going to double click to go into this event and just paste Control or Command plus the letter V. So this way these two events will be identical, and that could include all MIDI CC data in addition to notes. So let me know if that makes sense for what you want to do, Mike, if that's helpful or if I'm misunderstanding. All right, so wonderful seeing Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. Just saying howdy, Greg, into the Cubase Nation. We'll all start to get our virtual ice cream from Michael Teams. All right, we have Razel Zamini checking in from Denmark. We have Sable Winters saying hi to Michael Teams. Wonderful to see Brian Sawyer, who's, I guess, in Yuma, Arizona, as opposed to North Carolina. Hope you're enjoying your trip. Okay, so we see Mike Modern just says, if you don't get my point, I'm asking, how can you render a sound clip to an already existing MIDI pattern? So if it's like this particular pattern and we wanted to render it, I assume render to an audio file, you could just go to the render in place functionality. So let's say, okay, I want to take this and see. All right, so. So I'll just erase this. I'll come here. I'll make this the active track, active project. All right. So now I'll just come over here to edit to render in place. We'll go to our render settings. I could select the event if I want. So if we now want to render that as audio, I could just say render, and now we could have the original event muted, and now it's going to be rendered as audio. So see how you can render a sound clip to an existing MIDI pattern. So let me know if that's kind of what you're looking for, Mike. All right, you see Michael Teams is doing his virtual ice cream distribution. All right, so we see a question. Can I put my instruments to the group and then to VCA, or do I need to send to VCA from group? What is the correct way to use both on the same instruments? So they could really work pretty independently. So it's not uncommon to have instruments that are set up for groups as well as VCAs. So let me just, so we have, I'm just going to make sure I don't have. Okay, so let's say now I want to take these instruments here. All right, and now as we play them, all right, so if I want to, we'll go to our mix console. We'll say, okay, we'll see our audio returns here. So now what I want to do is we'll select these 3 tracks. Okay, so if we want to now come over and say we want to add a VCA fader to the selected channels, we could at this point just say, okay, we want to take these. So if I had like existing automation, we could keep the relative automation proportional, But I could also at the same time take those 3 channels, right click, and we can say add a group channel to the selected, and we'll call this our synth channel. So as soon as we do this, now I could have a group, and I could have a VCA for the same sources. And what the difference is if we have existing automation on our synths here, we could say, okay, we want to come over here to our VST instruments, and if we now come over and let's say, okay, we want to open up, automation that's going on, we could, adjust and kind of keep the proportional automation, but this won't allow us to the VCA won't sum the audio. But this, like if I wanted to take all of these tracks and run it through a phaser, I could come over here and now we could apply effects to all of the sound through the group. But if we go to like a VCA, the VCA is kind of more adept at dealing if you have existing automation curves and you want to bring all those tracks down, even if their automation curves were going in a contrary motion. So it doesn't really matter if you send it to a group or to a VCA, but here, these tracks could all be set to a VCA and to a group at the same time, and the order doesn't really matter, but the group channel will allow you to do processing on, so if you wanted to apply effects in EQ, whereas the VCA is just really listening. If you notice, there's no edit channel settings because there's no EQ or no other settings for changing the sound of the audio in the VCA. So it doesn't matter if you had the group first and the VCA second, or vice versa. You could just simply, those will work independently of each other, and it's fine. And there are particular times when it makes sense to use both. All right, so we see from Vidal, any idea when Cubase 14 is coming out? So I have an idea, but I would be probably violating a non-disclosure agreement if I did know. So, and once it's announced, it will be shipping. So we won't do this wait 6 weeks, wait 2 weeks, anticipation kind of stuff. So, all right, so we see Michael Teams just giving Agent K for his stealth mode moderation 1 gallon of strawberry delight ice cream. All right, so we see Ed Ruckman. Great to see you on. It says, hi, Greg. I've exported a mix and opened it in a new project. For some reason, the snap point is not at the beginning of the audio events. Is it because I used IXML chunk or a bug? What is this feature? So let's take a quick look and see if we could recreate it. Okay, so let me just take... Okay, so first let's make sure, so those who aren't familiar with like what the snap point is, so the snap point will allow us to, usually it will default to the beginning of a clip, and this will allow us to use that position for snapping the event. So now that I've moved it, we see this little white vertical line, and as we enable snap to grid, so I'm going to turn on snap, and we could turn that on and off with the letter J on your computer keyboard. You can notice that it is the white line that snaps to the position as opposed to the actual beginning of the event. So let's see, I'm going to move this snap point here to the beginning of the clip, and let's do an export audio mix down. All right, and then I'm going to have it create a new project. So we'll try, and I'll just do it as a standard WAV file. I'll leave the IXML chunk in. Okay, so we'll go ahead and export the audio. All right, here's our new project. Let's double click. And we see that the snap point here is at the beginning of the file by default. So it seems like the snap point wasn't really applied. Usually it's going to default to the beginning of the file unless it's applied, specifically moved somewhere else within the file. But here it just automatically put the snap point at the beginning of the file. So let me know if I did anything differently than you did with that. And I will try again. So let's say we won't save that. I'm going to put the snap point in the middle somewhere. And let's export and see if the IXML chunk makes a difference with that. So we'll do the same thing. After export, we'll create a new project and we'll see if that will, let me activate this project, sorry. Okay, so we have our snap point, middle of measure 3, create a new project, export, and we'll see if the snap point is preserved. And here we see that snap point is still kind of at the beginning of the event by default. So let me know if I approached it differently than you did on this ed. But it seems like the snap point is kind of independent when rendering the file until you actually adjust the snap point position. It's not part of the metadata for the audio file. See, Sable Winter says, "This ninja scared." What a name. Hearing Greg say it is messing with my head. Sorry, I guess I did it again for you, Sable. All right, Kenny Thacker asks, rookie question, how do you export multiple individual tracks with effects? So there's no rookie question. It's a great question. So let's go ahead and I will we'll take this and I'll just add a bunch of obnoxious reverb to drums on this example. So we'll come over here to the mix console. I'm going to take all of my drums. I'm going to add an effects channel track to all the drums. Let's add a reverb. So now we should have way too much reverb on our drums. So I'm going to set a small range that will export. So let's say we're going to export all these. I'll put it into a new project. So we're going to go to our export audio mixdown. And we want to choose multiple, so I could just kind of select all of my audio channels, and then we have an effects section here. So we could export everything dry. We could export with the channel inserts and the channel strip, which would include the EQ. We could also export with the groups and export the groups, the sends, and the master effects. So for this case, if I wanted to include the reverbs, like the send effects and the inserts, so now we will create a new project. So we'll come over here, we'll export the audio. And once we have that configured in the effects section, that will automatically include all of the effects processing right there in the files and export it. So it's pretty common for people to have maybe a dry export, one with effects, one with inserts and channel EQ, one with sends, and one with master effects. So we'll just about done. I think we have 2 more tracks. So now as we listen to the files here, the effects are burned into the files here. So once you go to the export audio mix down, the one button that's your one mouse click away from happiness is probably this effect section. And here's where you choose what processing you want on particular files. So let me know if that's helpful. And it's great to see you on, and ask any rookie question you want. All right, wonderful to see Alexander Plasko on. All right, so we see Michael Teams asks, howdy Greg, sometimes when I create a marker track, the ability to change the number to a word does not appear. What should I do to resolve this issue? Okay, so let me just jump back here. Let's add some markers. Okay, so a lot of times what you could do, one is you'll see like a marker ID. So if you just select that, I think we could go just into the description. And if you wanted to type in, like we could say, so the ID number will still be there. So we'll say Michael gives the, we'll say, best ice cream. So, all right, so you could kind of label. Now, if we want, we could also just kind of click on this little icon. And I think that there are some settings that we could say where if you don't want to see the numbers, that if we just want to see like the descriptions, you could say show marker IDs on the tracks, and now the IDs, the numbers will disappear, and you will just see the actual text. So once again, click right here, which is almost like the edit markers, like almost like the edit channel settings. And you could choose to hide the marker ID numbers if you wanted to do it just like that. So once again, or when you go to add markers, since version 12, you could do where you could just hold down the shift key. So, and now you could just, that will automatically, so as you click and hold down the shift key in the marker area, you could now just, as you click, that'll open up the naming field for you. And if we hold down, I think, Command Shift, we could set cycle markers. And just as we drag, that will add the cycle marker for the particular range. So let me know if that is helpful for you, Michael. So, I think if you just kind of come right over here, you could get rid of the numbers. And also, if you're in this window, you could just go to the description field, type in the marker description. If you hit the down arrow button, you could just navigate and enter in the marker descriptions all from this window, which you could open by hitting, I think it's Control or Command plus the letter M for marker. So you can see the marker description availability there. Just let me know if that's helpful for you, Michael. All right, so Zephaniah asks, hey Greg, does Cubase have a handheld remote for when doing vocals, and what's the requirements using Cubase? So if you wanted to have like a handheld, like, if you're looking for like transport control so that you could be at the vocal mic and, control your Cubase, there is an app called Cubase IC Pro. And the Cubase IC Pro app, and I believe it's for Android as well. Let me just check. I'm pretty sure I have it on my phone. But with that, you could do it on iOS and Android. Yeah, so, and that way you could be at the microphone away from your computer and just simply say, play, rewind, record, punch in, punch out. So check out the Cubase IC Pro app. And I think that will allow you to kind of be, as long as it's on the same like Wi-Fi network that your computer is on, that you could, do remote control of transport. So look for that in the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store. All right, we see Peter in Montreal is out shopping with his lovely wife today, and he just wanted to drop in and say hello. Have a wonderful day of shopping with your wife. Thanks for popping in. All right, so we see Brian is enjoying his trip to Arizona. It's great to hear. All right, and we have Oliver Schlaffer just saying hello. Thanks for joining us. All right, and Oliver's question is there a way to tap in beats into a time track using the keyboard in Time Warp? So if we wanted to use the, user keyboard, so depending on which, so in, I think, version 12 or 13 is when this had changed. So if we have a new project here, earlier versions, you go to the project and had a tempo calculator. Now, when we want to come over here, we could just say, okay, there's a tap tempo functionality. So let's say if we just come over here to tap, and I could just now, and I'm just going to hit and we could set this for, okay, I want to display only or set the project tempo. So let's say my project tempo is now, let's say I had it at 68, and I come over here to tap, we could just say we want to set the project tempo. So if I just hit my space bar, so we can say, okay, we're at 68. So I'm going to turn on tap. And then you could set the tap tempo. You could also just kind of set the project tempo. So, so there's different tap tempo functions. Now, if you wanted to do it from like a MIDI controller, like a MIDI note message, what you could do is just add a MIDI or an instrument track. And let's say I'm just going to tap out, let's say, quarter notes. So I'll start at the beginning. So I'm just going to hit record and say, so I have a series of tapped quarter notes, and if we want to turn that into a tempo map, so let's say we want to do that, what we could do is if you go to MIDI, to functions, and you can say calculate tempo from MIDI hit points, we could say I tapped in quarter notes, and now we could just come right over here, and that would automatically do tap tempo, and then when we go to our tempo track, we could see the changes and the tempo that's created from the tapped in MIDI. So if you wanted to tap in like with your space bar to kind of say, I want it this fast, or if you wanted to just tap along, if you're watching a scene in a film and you want to tap along the tempo, we have lots of composers that do that. You could just tap in and record a single MIDI note and create a tempo map directly from that. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, sorry, Chatfield jumped. Let me scroll back. All right. Sorry, you may hear people setting up for the event outside. Okay. All right. All right, so we see from Home Studio World says, thanks, Greg. How to fix tempo detection if audio has extensive tempo variations. So if, so once we have We'll just show this here. So activate this. Let's see if this is the right one. All right. Okay, so let's say, if you have, if you have tempo that's constantly fluctuating here. So if we take like this example, all right, so just go back to, all right, let me just get back. So how to fix tempo detection if audio has extensive tempo variations. All right, so if you need to do, so say we listen to this, I do my tempo detection. So go to the project menu, and let's get to the tempo detection here. We'll analyze. All right, now you may notice that if for some reason if it missed something, like maybe a drum fill threw it off, it places you into the audio warp mode, right? And then what we could do now is we could just put it into warp grid. And once we do this, we say, the downbeat for this particular note should have been earlier. What you could do now, and we notice that we have this little icon checked. So once you do a tempo detection, if you find that it is slightly off, you can make your adjustments here, and then it will automatically do a recalculation from that point onward. So, if you did a tempo detection and it, we can see here it's determining, the variations on every beat. So, it places you in, it activates the tool for you so that you could listen to it and make adjustments. And, once you make an adjustment, it's going to recalculate the tempo detection from that point onward. Now, if you wanted it to, how to fix a tempo, like let's say this is fluctuating a lot and I want it to be steady, what we could do now is just say, okay, I want to select that particular event. We will go to our audio menu to advanced, and we're going to say set definition from tempo. And what that's going to do is basically take all of the tempo change information and embed that as metadata into files. So if I wanted this to play back perfectly steady, right now we have like every beat a different tempo. I could just tell it not to follow the tempo. So I could turn the tempo track off. So now it's playing back at a perfect 120 beats a minute. But if I wanted this to be at 116 beats a minute, I could now have a perfectly steady tempo for all of my tracks. So there's no tempo fluctuation. When I turn the tempo track on, we're playing back the original tempo, and this also gives us the power to say, okay, I want to take this part of the tempo and I want to speed it up. Or if I want to do a retard down. So I could still keep that natural tempo fluctuations that were in the file. And now the whole tempo is just going to drift downward. So There's lots of different ways to fix tempo, whether you want it to make adjustments to the tempo detection, or whether you wanted to take the tempo detected audio that is fluctuating and make it steady, or change the fluctuations to a more musical result. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right. All right, Robert Higgins asks, in Very Audio, I select all. I want to transpose everything half step up or down. What keyboard command is there when I select all and use the up down arrow? It transposes whole steps. All right, so let's take a look. Okay, so let me just pop over to our Very Audio here. All right, so I just moved it up one. So you can see that as I'm doing the arrow selections, that it is automatically going up one semitone at a time. One thing that could throw this off is if you have the scale assistant on. So if you have scale assistant and we're using maybe set editor scale, and you have the snap pitch editing, that may take it up by whole steps and half steps. So if I have this disabled, it's going up one semitone or a half step at a time. But if the snap pitch editing is turned on and I use the up arrows, that it may jump to within the set scale. So see if you have the snap pitch editing on by any chance in the scale editor, in the scale assistant area of the Very Audio. And let me know if that makes sense for you, Robert. All right, so we see question, will Cubase 14 or 13 have a fake song AI detection tool? Best regards from Yazian in the Netherlands to detect if fake or real. So, you know, if a song is generated by AI, does that make it a fake song versus a real song? So I'm not sure if that's kind of would be our area of focus. To do like AI detection if something is fake or not, and what the definition of a fake song versus a real song is. So if you generate it, you know, if you write a song using AI tools, you know, you may not own it, and the AI algorithm may own the copyright, but it may not, you know, it could still be real music. So I'm not sure if that would be an area of focus for us, for Steinberg as a company. Okay, so we see from Mike Modern, says, I'm sorry if I misunderstood, says, no, I don't mean rendering MIDI to audio. It's the other way around, which is rendering audio to MIDI, that is making an audio clip trigger an already MIDI pattern so that the audio will have the MIDI pattern. Okay, so let's say, let's set this up. Okay, so I think we could maybe do a couple tools to do this. So let me just, I'll go to here. So let's say I want to take the kick drum and trigger a MIDI pattern. Okay, so it may not do it in real time, but I think we could still kind of get the desired result. Okay, so let's say I want to take this kick drum track, and let me just revert this away from my horrible reverb. I added in a previous demonstration here. Okay, so I want to take this. So I'm going to come over to my kick track, and then I want to go to my definition, or we'll go to hit points rather. And I want to edit the hit points, and here we could adjust the threshold, and let's say the intensity, and then you'll have a little create sub tab. So let's go solo this kick drum. And what I want to do now is we'll say let's add MIDI notes. So I can say let's put it on like C1 here. And I'm going to do we'll make a new MIDI track. I'll hit OK. Now let's say I want to add an instrument. So right now this kick drum is playing. All right, and we see that we're going to have MIDI notes. So I want to assign, let's say, an instrument. Let's just add something like Retrolog. And I want to put in like maybe a bass part. All right, so when we play one note, this is going to trigger the bass pattern here. So let's say we have our kick drum playing, and I'm just going to copy this part here. We could automatically extract it if we wanted to. So now every time that this kick plays, and so we have kind of short notes. So let me come over here, and I'm going to take all these notes, select all of my MIDI notes here, and just going to do select all, and then we'll go to MIDI functions, and then automatically I'll just do legato, so this will make the notes last longer. And if we go to like the arpeggio here, and I could just come over, let's say we'll go to our MIDI modifiers, and I'll take this up an octave. So if you wanted to hear that in conjunction with the drums. So we just basically generated a MIDI note from drums. Now, also, if you wanted to do, if it was something like more rhythmic, we could take, your audio, if you have like a monophonic voice here, and we could choose to, within Very Audio, to take this. So we have this, and then under functions, we could say extract MIDI. And now if we wanted to see kind of more melodic contour, we could do that. So if we wanted to replace, to have this automatically play back MIDI devices, you could do that. It's not going to work for chords from audio to MIDI, but you could do any of the monophonic sources like saxophones, vocals, bass, often without problems. Let's see, War U 303 has the same question of what makes a song real, though. So, all right, so we have Jan from Cubase Index checking in. Thanks for always wonderful to see you on. Okay, so we see Blibes asks, when a Cubase 13 feature for making a Mondegreen effect. Let me know what a Mondegreen effect is. I don't know what it is off the top of my head. Let me just see if I can look it up on my other computer here. I think anybody here. I guess it's for Mondegreens are fun auditory mix-ups showing how we mishear words in funny or odd ways. So let me know if that's kind of what you want, like an effect to, so you could mishear lyrics or something. So I'm not sure if it's kind of a plugin or maybe more of a performance feature, like that's done by the person that you're recording. All right. So we see Jazz Dude just laid out the description. Says a Mondegreen effect is a type of mishearing or misinterpretation of a phrase, typically in a song or poem, where the listener substitutes words that sound similar and make sense, often creating a new and unintended meaning. So, yeah, so I'm not sure if it's like plugins could do that or if it's more kind of psychological, you know. Like if you listen to, I think it's AC/DC's TNT, and you think of different words that they're saying, the background vocals, you'll hear different words. But so I'm not sure if we'll see an effect like that in Cubase 13. So we see original question says, yes, is it possible to make misheard lyrics as a feature? So again, I think that it's more, you know, like if you think of the vocals for Louie Louie and no one understands the lyrics to it, it's, I think, more of a performance feature. All right, so we have Oliver Schlaffer asks, I'm new to Cubase using 13 Pro. Can you show me how to set up Cubase with a PreSonus Fader Port 8 so that I could use the faders to write in MIDI CC data? All right, so first, there's probably going to be like a little applet for, you know, not all MIDI fader devices actually transmit MIDI CC messages independently. So like on my Korg Nano Control, if I come over, let's say applications, we just close these out. And we go to applications, like my Nano Control, which I carried with me to Nashville, has like a little app, like an editor, and this will allow me to determine which MIDI CCs that the control is doing. So when we want to come over here, we can say, and I have two different Korg controller editors. Let me see if this is. So, but so a lot of times you may have, let me see if I just unplug this. So I have two. So let's say if I go to my Nano Control here. Okay, so here we could actually set which MIDI CCs are being transmitted. Now what happens a lot of times is if like the fader port is probably working as a Mackie control device. And that's how it interfaces with most DAWs, because a lot of people are kind of treating it like a Mackie control. So you want to go to your studio menu, to studio setup. And if you see like a Mackie control or a fader port, you probably just want to set your Mackie control here. It's great. People bring me lunch when I'm doing live streams in Nashville. Thanks to my colleague, Russ. Thank you. All right. Get treated like a rock star here. All right, let me clear my throat. Yeah. All right. So make sure that you don't have it configured as a Mackie control device here. If it's configured as a Mackie control device, it may transmit MIDI CC messages, but it may be just kind of almost hijacked or kind of intercepted, if you will, to turn those MIDI CC messages into the Mackie control. Now, what MIDI CC messages it's actually transmitting is up to the device. So a lot of times you may use like the little applet or within the device itself to actually pick and choose which particular which particular MIDI CCs are being transmitted from it. And if you don't know what MIDI CCs are being actually transmitted, what you could do is just simply come over and if you go to the MIDI inserts, you will see right here a MIDI monitor plugin. And then as you move the faders, you should see which MIDI CC message is coming in from the device. So make sure that your device is set on all MIDI inputs. And then you could, from the device, choose to remap particular MIDI CCs so that it's transmitting the MIDI CCs that you want. Okay. See, Kenny Thacker just says, thank you. Thanks. Okay, so we see Michael Teams just says the description box does not show up. What then? All right, so let's come over here. Let's say to our marker track that we have here. So as soon as so say if we grab the marker, so see, Michael, if when adding a marker, if you actually just hold down, let me just make sure, the shift key, if you could label. All right, it was just, so once you click with the shift key, but you could always, so if you don't see the description here, select the marker track, click on this little icon, and then you should be able to see all the descriptions just laid out for you right here as well. So give that, let me know if you open up, select the marker track and then click again just to the right of the marker window, or hit Command or Control plus the letter M if that window pops up, and if you see the description, and it could be that maybe it's narrow and maybe you have to kind of scroll over or make the description area bigger here. You could make this larger. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Michael. All right, so we see a question from Ed Rugman. Says, hi, Greg, thanks for answering the snap point. Says, I'm dragging in audio files manually to the project. Is there any way a snap point can be inherited as the audio file is dragged in dependent on cursor? All right, so let's say if I drag a file in. Okay, so we'll come here. We'll jump to media, let's go to our loops. And I'm going to drag a quick file in here. Clear that filter. Okay, so I have this file. Now, I think that there is a function. So I don't think it's going to be inherited, but I think if you have the cursor, let's say in the middle here between bars, I think that there is a function that we could put the snap point to cursor. So now as I have my grid enabled, that snap point was based on the cursor position. So I'll just read it again. It says, I'm dragging audio files manually to the project design way. A snap point can be inherited as the audio file is dragged in dependent on cursor. So I think that you just have to manually set the snap point. And again, if you want to snap point like right here, all you'd have to do is from the audio menu, choose snap points from cursor, and you could assign keyboard shortcuts. And then that's going to be the snap point that is synchronized to the project window. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Ed. All right, so we see from VRomed or VRomed. It says, hello, Greg. How can I delete unused edit files in Cubase? I was under the impression that clearing the media pool will delete all unnecessary files, but that's not the case. Okay, so let's do a new project here. All right, and we'll go to, let's say, our desktop. Okay, and we'll call this okay, so I'm going to add, let me clear my throat. All right. Sorry about that. All right, so let's add a couple of audio tracks. And we'll do a recording on these, and then we'll delete some of the files. Okay, so we come here, we record. We have audio 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so we now stop our recording. As we do this, let's say I erase files. So we have only audios 1 and 2. We go to our pool window under the media, or hit Control or Command plus the letter P. All right, so we see these two files. And then if we say, okay, let's remove unused media. Okay, so we say we're going to move it. We put it into the trash. We see that, okay, these two files were already in the trash. Okay, when we erased them from the file, so they went into the trash folder. So right now, what we'd want to do is you could right click and choose to empty trash. And then at that point, we could choose erase, and then those files are erased from your hard disk. So let me know if that works. Okay, so we see Ed Rugman says, I'll try doing an auto import to new project like you did and see if it imports without the snap offset. So. Okay, so we have Suede TV. Just says, all right, sorry, my chat field jumped. Okay, Sway TV asks, trying to get my head around using Dither. I'm in Wavelab 12 Pro and have a 24-bit 48K file, stereo. So if I re-export that file with settings for 16-bit master for CD, do I still need to dither? At what point do I or don't I need to dither that file? So if you're going down from like a 24-bit to a 16-bit file, it's always good to do dithering so that the other, the 8 bits or 16 additional bits, depending what you're working with, aren't just kind of discarded. So when we come over here, let's say we'll have this file here, and I probably need to. So what I would do is, when you come over to your dithering, we could just say, okay, I want to, use my dithering plugin here, and there will be different ones. Just so like the Lin dither. So if you have this in in your dithering stage, that when you now render the files, at this point, once you have like kind of the dithering included, that it will now be rendered into the file just by having the dithering. So if you're going to be going from a higher resolution, or changing 32-bit to 24-bit, 24 to 16, higher sample rates, it's always wise to do dithering in those scenarios. All right. You see Jazz Dude's bringing out a point, just saying we have more than one marker tracks, and he uses them as a super track also. So yeah, you could have 10 marker tracks in Cubase, and I think 32 marker tracks in Nuendo. See Tim Weinheimer just giving special thanks to Jan at Cubase Index for his efforts with the Cubase Index site, which we all appreciate. All right, and we have Pertti Komenen checking in from Finland. Thanks for joining us. All right, Sable Winters is saying, Cubase Greg, when does your event start? Today or tomorrow? So it's going to be tomorrow at 7 p.m. in Nashville. So it's going to be a live in-person event. So we're not going to be streaming it. We're choosing to do our stream today and have people come out. It's hard to have people come out for a live stream event, I would think. Okay, so Sway TV is just asking when and how, or is there a ducking function in Nuendo 13, please? So a lot of people would just use like a compressor. So let's say, and you could do like a sidechain compressor. So let's come over and say I have, I will just get rid of these particular tracks. All right, so let's say I have, again, maybe like a background atmosphere. All right, and now I want to import, let's say, a different file, maybe dialogue. So I had some dialogue tracks in here. Okay, yeah. Okay, so let's say I have like my background.
So Scott Dixon joining us
and
now.
I want that to duck down, so we would just use a ducker. So to do that, we would just apply a compression on this particular track. So we'll just throw in a dynamics. We'll go to our compressor. All right. And we want to have this track side chained by our dialogue track. So let's say all of these tracks are going to come in a little later.
So Scott Dixon joining us now, and this is
Or I'll just do the opposite way here. All right, so let's say we'll take this, and we have like our drone sound.
So Scott Dixon joining us now, and this is I interviewed him Victor Lane for SportsCenter just moments after you'd won the race in the championship. And I asked you a question then that you weren't ready to answer, but I'm going to ask you now. And we've had a little while, which is, I look at this list of all-time open wheel champions.
So that way, what you could do is basically just have this dialogue track drive the compression on that particular event, and you could do ducking, but there's no specific ducking function. Wavelab, as kind of an audio editor, will have specific ducking functionality, but you could just do it and accomplish it through side chaining inside of Nuendo. Mastering engineer Greg Lukens, the amazing Greg Lukens, calling. I'll reach out to him after the live stream. All right, so we have a Fiery Studio just checking in from Tanzania Nation. Thanks for joining us. All right, and we see Val checking in from Vienna. All right, so Robert Higgins says, "Thank you, Greg. You answered my question. You guys are gods." I'm just an Oompa Loompa in a world of Willy Wonkas. It gets to help people, so. All right, so we have a question. Does Greg use UAD native plugins or SoftTube? Which is the best for you? Thanks. I have a collection of SoftTube plugins. I have some of the UAD plugins that they've given away free, but I tend to use a lot of the stock plugins. So I don't, in all fairness, I'm not doing like lots of huge projects of mixing. Like projects I'll be recording my bass, like for Hot Mess projects or other projects. So I don't use the SoftTube plugins. I think I don't use them as regularly. Usually my time in Cubase is on live streams and helping people answer questions. I know that they're highly regarded, that they sound great, but I think that the built-in Cubase plugins are also wonderful too. So. All right, so we see NickBeat888 says, "Hello, Greg from London. Is it possible to make a new project default to the new project mixdown folder instead of the mixdown folder where the template derived?" All right, so a template doesn't really have any like location so I'm not sure if you're actually starting from a template or if you're doing a new project. So, but let's say if I was doing a new project here, let's say I'll build a template. So I want to do a new project. Okay, I want a groove. I want to add 8 audio tracks. I want to add a groove agent. I want to add, let's say, the grand, because I want a piano, and I want to come over and let's add 2 reverb, or 2 effects. So let's add an effect track. So we'll add a reverb, and let's add a delay. Okay, so we'll come right over here. And now what I'm going to do is just to save this as a template. So right now we started this project and we have the project in a folder. As soon as I come over here and I want to save as a template specifically, so we'll come right over here. So I'm sorry, we'll just go to Save As Template. All right, and we'll call this October 22nd, 2024. And we'll hit OK. All right, so now when I start a project with a template, we'll come over here, we'll do New Project. I'm going to choose our So this is our template that we just made. Now when I'm starting from a template, by default, since Cubase 11, it'll say default prompt for project location. So let's say I'm going to save this to my desktop. Okay. I come over here. We'll give it a new folder. We'll say October 22nd, 2024. Delete. Okay, so this is now the project folder starting from the template. So the template itself has no affiliation with any folder once you're starting with the project. So I come here, we're going to activate the project. We'll say yes. We'll see my 8 audio tracks. All right, so I record audio. Okay, so we have audio recordings, and let's do our mix down. So we'll say we'll go to our export audio mix down. Let me just set my left and right locators first. So we're going to do our stereo mix down. And at this point, we'll say the path, we're going to choose the project mix down folder. Okay, so we see that this is going to go to desktop, October 22nd, 2024, delete me into a mixdown folder. We'll call the mixdown, hey, mix. And now we'll export the audio. Okay, so we have the audio. So let's go ahead and take a look. So we'll go to my Finder, let's get to our desktop, and we'll see our mixdown folder, and it should have the hey mix.wave. So we can see that, the template, again, doesn't have a file path. It's kind of independent of the file path. So, make sure that when you're doing this, that you're actually starting with a template and not another project that has no files in it. But make sure that you actually come here and you choose to save as template before starting, and that should clear any preset or preconceived file path locations for the mixdown folder. So let me know if that makes sense for you, NickBeat888. Okay. All right, so we have Butterfist saying hi. All right, Eric Fox just says, hi, Greg. Wonder if it's a chance that Cubase 14 will have an option to convert audio drum loop to MIDI with separate channels. That would be amazing. Regards. So you can kind of do that so we'll see what 14 has, but if you have a drum loop, you can, if you have Spectral Layers, you could break down the kick, snare, hi-hat, and cymbals, and at that point, drag the files out and do sample replacement. So if you have Spectral Layers, you could kind of do it. It's not kind of it's maybe a 3 or 4 step process, but you could do that. So let's take a quick look at that. So let's say we have new project. We'll find a quick drum loop. Okay, so let's say I have this particular file here. So we can kind of do this if you have Spectral Layers Pro. One of the cool things in Spectral Layers Pro 11 is the ability so I'm going to take this track and we'll go to our extensions and we're going to say, let's go to Spectral Layers. And then when we get to our modules menu, we get to say, let's unmix drums. So now as we do this, Now each of these layers can be brought, so I want to take my kick. So we'll take now my kick, and let's say I'll load up a instance of Groove Agent SE to play back our MIDI. Okay, so what I can do now, we have this. I'm going to take the hit points from, so we could go into the sample editor, and you might have to just quickly come here and choose bounce selection. We can replace the event, so we double click. And we can go to the hit points. All right, so we can edit the hit points, and then we could convert to MIDI. So we'll put on C1. I will put it onto the first selected track where we have Groove Agent. And now we can. So, and if I wanted to do the same thing for the snare, I could, again, just come to the file here. Let's drag the snare out. And at this point, again, I will bounce selection, replace the events. Let's come over to our snare. So we'll go to our hit points as we did before. And let's select our Groove Agent track. So let's create MIDI notes. And we'll make this D1. So now our kick and snare will be playing from Groove Agent. So let's just put this into a loop. And I'll mute the kick and snare from the original device. So you could just, so let's say we will mute, you know, so that's how you could kind of do it. So, you know, if you have Spectral Layers, you could unmix like the drum loop very easily and then kind of do that. You know, I could see where, you know, having it built in and a more streamlined process, but if you had to do it now, you do have the capabilities of doing that. So. All right, so we have Nikolai Goryanov asks, hi, will the problem with even distribution of CPU cores be solved so that ASIO Guard works perfectly? Just my MacBook Pro M1 Max is straining, but the load on the processor is not distributed at 100%. All right, so how it's going to work when you're doing, I think that if you do analysis, you'll find that Cubase has some of the best functions for, spreading the distribution load. Now, what happens is, and just how every program will work, one single track is going to utilize, one core. So let's say one track has 16 plugins on it, and you have 100 tracks have, like one plugin on them. That one track with 16 plugins, if it's kind of maxing out your CPU core, will, could cause your audio performance to stutter. Quick example. So I think I have a project to kind of show this. We'll call it CPU distribution. This is this project. Okay, so I put like a super heavy plugin that had multiple, like 6 plugins within one instance of the plugin. All right, so I'm going to take a number of tracks, and it's just how like the computer processing is worked. That one task can only utilize one CPU core, and maybe if the operating systems get better, that could change. So I'm going to enable in this project I'm going to enable 16 tracks that have one plugin. Give it just a minute here. Okay, so we could see that when we look at our tracks, so these 16 tracks have one instance of the multi-tap delay, and this multi-tap delay has like 5 plugins in it. So I have 16 of these playing in one on 16 tracks. So when we play and we listen to it, I'll just turn the volume down. We can see that we could play this project. We see the Azio Guard is up there, but so we can see that this is playable. We see the playback cursor. Now I'm going to do kind of the opposite, and we're going to disable all these tracks. So we have 16 plugins now, spread across 16 plugins spread across 16 tracks. So I'm going to take the same plugin and turn it on one track, but I'm using 16 instances of the plugin on this track. So we enable this top track. And again, this top track is going to have 16 plugins on one track. And when we do that, that's only going to utilize one CPU core. All right, so we see all these plugins. And now when I hit play, you'll probably notice immediately kind of like red for CPU overload. And if you look at the playback cursor, we can see how it's kind of chugging along. And we see just kind of like super, we're immediately in the red CPU-wise and can't even really play back. It's just totally maxed out. So if you have virtual instruments, most virtual instruments, if you put 16 different sounds in one instrument, that one instrument is utilizing one CPU core. Some instruments like Hallian can utilize multi-core CPUs, but a lot of instruments don't. So, some of it is just reality of how computers, operating systems work. So, you could kind of perhaps maybe allocate, if you're using a lot of virtual instruments and you're using a lot of sounds within one single instance and your instrument doesn't have multi-CPU support, that you kind of spread it out to multiple instruments if you want to. Or, if you have one track that has 16 plugins, maybe you send it to a group and run 8 of the plugins on the source track and 8 of the plugins on a group. So there is some strategy that's involved with your CPU core usage. And I think that you'll see that, we're doing everything we can within the hardware architectures and the operating system architectures to make it work and be as efficient as possible. All right, see Perti come in and likes his ice cream choice. All right, so we have Rebel ask, can you explain how to use Step Designer? All right, let's take a look at it. I haven't played with that one in a while. Sorry if you're hearing a lot of gear being moved in the background. Just wanted to be able to do the live stream today and not cancel it. All right, so let's say I'm going to have a bass here. All right, so I want to come over here and the Step Designer, let's make sure. So the Step Designer is going to show up as a plugin, so often as a MIDI insert. So we'll come over here to our Step Designer. All right, so what we want to do is we could pick, okay, how many steps do we want? So let's do 16. So I want to come here. All right, so we can see our pitch indicated. All right, so now we'll come over and let me just solo this. All right. All right, so let's just start, we'll just start brand new here. So let's say, we'll just do a new bank here. So, what we're able to do, I'll just start from scratch here real quick. All right, so we can see that we're going to have kind of our velocity settings. So if we wanted to come here, let's just say, okay, we want to put in a note. So as we play. And then, there's always different factory presets. So you say, okay, I want to do this. So if we want to see this kind of spread out more. And now we could actually just kind of trigger different patterns if you wanted to. Let me just knock this up an octave so we can hear it a little better. So, and then we could adjust like the velocity for different elements. So we can say, okay, I want to come here. And I'll just adjust the octave here in the instrument here. So it's really just kind of ability to kind of trigger different patterns. And if you wanted to kind of randomize the pattern, you have like little dice that you could throw here. And then as you play, this pattern could always be triggered. So you could just come over here, and if you wanted to shift the pattern over to the right or to the left for variations, or move it down an octave or up an octave. And then you could trigger different patterns from different MIDI notes as well. So think of it as like a little pattern generator for coming up with different musical ideas. All right, so we have Recyclop checking in from Finland. Thanks for joining us. All right, Vincenzo asks, is it possible to move the effect chain in a track of the mixer to an offline processing automatically? All right, so let's just drag a file over here. Okay, so let's say here I have like a particular pattern, and I'll just solo just this. All right, and so let's say I have we'll go to my inserts, and let's just load up so we'll just jump over here and load up a preset for we'll go to our track presets and get audio. All right, so let's say I want my mastering preset, and I drag and drop that here. So let's say I have my effects chain preset. So we say we have a studio EQ, and we want to apply this to our direct offline processing. So I think that we could actually we could just drag and drop all the events right there to the offline processing and have that automatically applied. So that's all you have to do is, so say if I remove all of these events, so right click, delete all of my effects that are here, we could just drag. So if you just grab it on the insert line and just drag and drop, then all of the plugins will automatically be embedded as a direct offline process. So let me know if that's what you want to do, but just drag it into the area right here. So just drag your inserts, and then all the insert chain will automatically be applied as a direct offline process and embedded into the file. And you can save a preset of that as well if you want. Okay, so we see Michael B. asks, how to change the volume of MIDI notes different than velocity without affecting on effects level. Expression Map can do this. All right, so let's say we want to, we'll come over, let's take our expression map. Let's say, so a lot of times when we want to look at MIDI, so let's say we have, let's say maybe like a cello part here. I'll take it off loop, so. All right, so you know, depending on how the instrument is designed, some instruments, like a lot of drum instruments, their dynamics are going to be driven purely by velocity. So, and a lot of MIDI instruments. So if I wanted to get louder or softer. So another way of doing this, if you don't want to use velocity, as you asked, is just to use, just about all instruments will respond to MIDI CC7 volume. So we could come over here and just say, okay, I want this to fade, let's say. Now, some instruments will also, like as we would play an instrument, depending on which instrument that we are in, you may, so we'll go ahead and we'll open this up. So this is Iconica Sketch that comes with Cubase. So let's say we're playing, and now I'm on a sustain. That when you're doing this, like the sustain, and I just have a little portable controller, so I don't, let's just see if I could switch this over to modulation. But let's say if I'm playing back a particular note, if it's a sustained note that's held long, that we may have to adjust your velocity value here, or your modulation or expression data. So, and the point is that, you know, like a string sound may actually change volume. And let me just reset my MIDI volume here real quick. Hang on. So, you know, unlike other instruments, if you're holding a string note, you know, you may change the dynamics within a single note. So if it's a velocity, you only set that dynamic like for a percussion instrument, and for like a, you know, traditional piano, you can't really change the volume, you know, once you strike the note like a percussion instrument. So, but strings, you can, you know, just swell within the same note. So particular a lot of string libraries, you may use either MIDI CC1 modulation or expression, so that you could alter the dynamics within a note that's held long, like you would utilizing a bow, or what you would do as a wind player, brass player, by sending more air out to make the notes louder and softer. So to simulate that, what you would do is often use MIDI CC1 or MIDI CC11, but some instruments, most orchestral instruments will respond to that. Not all of them will. So, and you may have short notes that don't respond to it. So if you're doing like staccato notes, you know, these won't have an effect because they're intended to be shorter notes. So, but if you switch to like a legato, then those expressions can make a difference. So if you wanted to have kind of to simulate kind of the musicality of using a bow, you could just simply utilize, you know, whatever MIDI continuous controller. You try MIDI CC1 or CC11, and that will do the dynamics for you. It's not really using expression maps, but the expression map may switch it to an articulation that responds to those MIDI CCs versus another MIDI CC that doesn't respond to those dynamics through a MIDI CC. All right, so Recyclop asks, is there a way to A/B several changes on a mix, as in changes over 2 or more plugins over several channel settings? So if you don't have like automation, you could use mixer snapshots for this. And as the name implies, a mix console snapshot is just going to be for the particular, state that it is in. So it's not going to incorporate automation. So let's say we'll come here and let me revert this. So let's say we wanted to do a couple of inserts and you wanted to A/B. So let's say I'm in my drums here, so I want to take my kicks and we'll get to the mix console, get to our inserts. And now I want to put in let's say an envelope shaper for these. All right. And now I wanted to put in, let's say an EQ. So I want to put in frequency, and for all of these tracks, I'm going to activate so we'll put in our frequency EQ for sorry, I may have accidentally. Okay, so we have my frequency EQ. So what we could do now is take a snapshot. Okay, and recall settings, I want to just be inserts, let's say. And we could do selected channels only. All right, so let's say now I'm listening to this. Let's adjust my envelope shaper. All right, so we'll come over here, we'll adjust these channels. I want to make it like super obvious that my kick is different. All right, so I'm gonna save this as a snapshot. So we'll say we're going to include our inserts. All right, now I'm going to take all the processing off. Okay, so no processing, and we'll take another snapshot. So now I could just say, all right, and let's say I want it. All right, so now we could say, let's recall mix snapshot 2. And let me just put those inserts back on here real quick, sorry. Okay, so let's come over and adjust our EQ. So let me add all these one more time. So, sorry. Okay, so again, let's take and okay, so now as we're playing, you go to snapshot 1. Let's go to snapshot 3. So this is how you can A/B multiple tracks with different processing on it. So say, okay, now our processing. So you could take mixed console snapshots, and again, that's not going to take into effect like automation as well. So let me know if that works for you, Recyclop. All right, my chat field jumped. Let me see if I can catch up. See, I have lots of questions. Okay. All right, so we see Michael Teams has granted my family and myself 1 gallon of Golden Opulence Sundae ice cream. Great flavor. So Space is Water just says, your show is amazing. You're a real Jedi of Steinberg products. I just, I think that the work that the development and planning teams do is amazing, and I'm lucky I get to show what the options that they present for their users. All right, so Forward Thinking asks, hey Greg, I had a project which was using the GM Percussion in Groove Agent 5 SE. All of a sudden, none of the samples can be found, and I can't even find the GM Percussion anymore. How can I rescue? So make sure that you are in, because I don't think that there's a GM Percussion that's in Groove Agent SE. So let's come over here. Let's add a instrument track. So we'll go to, so I don't think that there is a GM library. It might be a Hallian Sonic instrument instead. So let's say if we come over here, we'll just type in GM. Yeah, so I don't think that there's going to be like a general MIDI kit, but let's take a look inside of Hallian Sonic. So we go over here to Hallian Sonic. And now, let's say we want to do GM. And then let's say if we just come over here to and here's the entire GM library. So if you wanted to come over, you'll see the, GM drum kit, stereo GM kit. So make sure that, I think that the GM kit is going to be playing back through Halion Sonic, and you can find it in the basic sound set and not in Groove Agent. So let me know if that might be the case, that it might be in, that it could be. Now let's go to your limiter. All right. So if we wanted to, so let's say I wanted it to be like minus 23-ish. We could just set the limiter accordingly here. Now we can see the relationship as we adjust here. And then we can just have it. So you can see how the input gain of your mixer or your limiter here. And also if you want to say, okay, let's set this up to, let's say 0. So even though like they're kind of two different values of dB is what we will set kind of as the threshold. There's the value for the dynamics within the limiter. We could see immediately the response that's going to have on the loudness unit scales. All right, so we see Rob Schmedeke from Tarpon Springs. We hope that you got through the storm okay. And he just says, I seem to have lost all my factory drum maps in Cubase 13. I can't open a project in 12, and they work as expected. Or it says, maybe I can open. They work as expected. If I start with 13, the preferences bypass. They also work. Is there files I need to move over from 12 to 13? What I would do is maybe, and I know you had kind of similar problems with our issue that was kind of along these lines, but I would go to your preferences here. Go to your edit menu and then go to your profile manager and back up your current profile. So back that up, and then what you could do is if you bypass your preferences, at that stage, let it rebuild your preferences, and you could always go back here and recall what your preferences were before. But if they're kind of starting with the preferences bypass, and I know you had another issue, if my memory serves right, that it worked when the preferences were bypassed, I would maybe, choose to rebuild your preferences. Okay, I see the correction, Rob, that he can get the drums to work in 12 and not 13. So, all right. So FlyV just says I just got my play button to work on my new Arturia keyboard. It was giving me trouble mapping it. It says, but my QC7 won't let me map it, and it won't work. So let me know what a QC7 is, or if it's CC7. Let me see. Or if the QC7 is a different controller entirely. If you could let me know, that'd be great. All right, just going to check. All right, just got a message the stream was out, but it looks like it's okay. We can just check. Hang on 1 second. All right, I'm just going to refresh the live stream here on my end. Let me just see if it's... Just got a message from Benny. Let me just check my network. Just make sure it's there. Since I'm in a different location, it could be... All right, so it looks like it's okay. I just want to make sure. All right. Let me go back to questions. All right, so we see from Florin Pastor is, I'll just come over. Let's open up a different project here. Okay, so let's say we want to take just a guitar part or something. Let's see. You know, you could quantize audio very similar to MIDI. So let's say if I'm here. All right, so if I wanted to quantize like this guitar part, so let's zoom in so we can see it. So as we come over, so I could really just kind of select it. Let's go to like our quantize settings. So this will, you know, we could just choose audio warp here. And I can say, okay, I want this to quantize to eighth notes. So now when I hit Q, we can see that the audio is shifted if I undo. So we could just kind of take this particular audio. So it's going to be kind of warping, but you don't have to manually do free warping, but just hit the letter Q. And then you can see that the audio will automatically quantize based upon that particular values. Okay. Okay, I guess the live stream dropped out for a little bit. Sorry about that. Thanks for the messages from everyone. All right, so we see from V. Romed says, thanks for your answer, Greg, but I was actually referring to files in the edit folder that Cubase makes. I could have framed my question a little better. Okay, so we see, and it says, if I reverse an audio event, it makes a new file. I reverse the same audio event, it makes another file in the edit folder. I ended up with a large set of edit files that weren't in use. Rendering the audio event just makes the new audio file, which can be found in Media Bay. How can I keep only the last edit and delete all the previous ones? Media Pool doesn't seem to clear out the edit folder. Okay, so we'll go ahead and show this real quick. All right, so the edits folder is there so that you could specifically at any time go back and do process. So let's say if I will go into this particular, we'll use the same folder under desktop. And now that we do, sorry for my misunderstanding on that, but if I drag a file here, I now do offline processing. So let's say I want to do a fade in on that file. We have that. I want to reverse the file. So again, we get audio to processes. Let's reverse. let's come over here and let's apply a plugin. So we'll say, okay, let's apply distortion on a file. So now when we go to our desktop, sorry, close that. Let's go to the desktop. We'll see that these files will be in the edits folder. All right, so we'll come over here to desktop. All right, so now we have these files in edits folder, so we could immediately go back. So I think if we come over, all right, so let's say in the sample editor. Now, if we go to the process, we could say, I think maybe it's under, if we just choose flatten the file. All right, and let's go back. Sorry, it's my learned muscle memory mistake. All right, so let's see if all right, so let's say in the direct offline processing, so let's say we select, I'll just do this process one more time here since we flattened that. Okay, so now let's see if we go. If we choose to make all permanent. Okay, so now we go in the offline process history and we choose to make it all permanent. Let's see, there's still. All right, now I know one way that you could do this, and there's probably a better way, and I could think of it. Maybe I'll have it for Friday's live stream. But if we go over and we choose to backup project, so let's give it a new folder. All right, so we'll make a new folder here. Now we have the chance to make direct offline processing permanent. So I'm going to check that there. Now let's hit OK. We'll give it a name. Hang on 1 second. All right, sorry for the interruption. So we'll see if these folders are gone now. So let's go over here to so we can see that once we did the Save Project to New Folder, that the edits can be eradicated, but I'll see if I could come up with a better way of doing that from the original. But I think it's, the intention is that you could go back at any time and do that. But I thought that maybe making it permanent, but I'll play around with it for an answer on Sunday. All right, jump back. All right, so we see David M. is driving and listening to the live stream. All right, reading through comments. All right, so you see Chabable asks, how can I prolong a syllable of a vocal to infinity in Cubase Pro? All right, so let's take a look. So I'm not sure if we could do it to infinity, but maybe a delay of some kind. I guess at some point you would want it to stop and not go on for 100 years or longer. All right, so let's say we have maybe, as we're playing with this, all right, I just, all right, so it's fine, just,
I feel the way.
all right, so let's say if we want to extend this particular, you could, let's say if we wanted to, so let's say we play that, one of the tricks that you could do is using kind of let's come over, let's put on just one quick tool that comes to mind if you wanted to extend, maybe you found under Other, and you'll see Loop Mash FX. So this isn't forever, but if you come here, we could just say,
I feel the way. I feel the way. Oh, way.
all right, so let's, so here if you just hold the note down, and it's usually let go. So as long as you hold a MIDI note down, you can do that. Now if you also want to drag that file into the sampler track, you could just come over. So let's drag this into the sampler track, and if you want to set a loop point, so let's say as we're playing here, we want this to, let's say, be our start. And we want it to be our end time. Let me just grab this. So we could kind of set, we want this as our sample. And then if you want to set loop points,
In the air, in the air.
so we could now come over and just say, okay, I want this to loop continuously.
In the air, in the air,
And you could kind of set different loop points for start and end here. So say, okay, now we want this. You know, let's go ahead and zoom in. So we can say, okay, I want my loop to start here. And if you want to grab the end point of the loop, like if you're going to set a small loop,
in the air.
and then you could edit kind of the loop points.
In the air.
And then, you know, you could edit that if you wanted to, but, you know, so there's a couple of different approaches that you could take. All right, Michael Teams wants everyone to smash the like button. All right, wonderful to see Mark Raven. Everyone give a big woof to Stella, Mark Raven's dog. All right. All right, John Costigan says, Greg, I hope you and yours are well. I've never watched a drummer change drum tuning for a song. How do I determine what the tone center should be while I'm sequencing a drum track? So a lot of times when you're doing it, you know, like I remember, like, you know, I was playing in kind of a classic rock band and the drummer came from kind of a jazz project before. And, you know, what he was running into was, you know, like his kick drum was actually tuned to around an F note, like the pitch of an F. And, you know, which works really well in jazz, but in rock stuff where the tonal centers are often like E and A, it could, you know, not, you know, it could conflict, especially with like low bass notes and stuff like that. And it's one of those things that you often don't think of until it's like, oh, yeah, why is the low end kind of weird? You know, and you don't think to tune your particular bass drum notes. You know, you can get a sense, and a lot of times people think of when we do MIDI that we have the ability to, you know, just come over here and we could tune, you know, like we could have a MIDI note that triggers, you know, a particular. So sometimes when you're just listening to it by ear, you know, you could come here and, you know, just take this and say, okay, I just want to adjust the tuning. And sometimes you just do it for like a different flavor of the drum sound. But sometimes, you know, especially with a live drum recording, you could just kind of get that dialed in. And if you get that, you know, you know, it's always something worth trying to see if you adjust it, if it sounds magically better, or you adjust it, it's way worse, you know. So a lot of times you can just adjust the tuning here. And if you're on a live drum recording, you could just simply adjust like the tuning right here from the info line and play around with it. Because sometimes if there's like uncertainty in like the drum tuning, it's not the place you think to look first, but that could often be causing different problems in the mix in the low end. It's like, why isn't the low end working? You know, so try adjusting the tuning of the kick to see if that makes a difference as well. All right. All right, so we see question, is there a way to overlap notes in the step sequencer to get a slide, for example, with the 303? So generally MIDI, you can't have a note on and a note off message on the same pitch at one time. But if we wanted to, let me just open up a quick project and we can show you how to do some glide stuff. So we'll come over here. I think I may have it under, just find the right folder. Okay, I think this is the folder. All right, so let's say we have this, so we have a sampler track. So let's say I have something like this, and I want to drag this to my sampler control. So we'll come over here. And now we could just adjust my octave. So, often when, if you wanted to simulate glides, because, if we have a MIDI note, so let's come over here, we'll just draw in like a quick MIDI note. And if I wanted to have another MIDI note on top of it, so let's say we'll come here, I'm going to draw in another MIDI note here, but let's put it on the same pitch. That what's going to happen is the first note's going to cancel out. So because MIDI can't play the same note when it's received a note on and a note off message. So, but what you can do is if you're using something like the sampler track, is just kind of set up different glide options. So let's say if we're in our sampler control, so, and what we would do now is we would just kind of come right over here. We could activate under pitch. We have our glide amount, so we could put it into like a monophonic mode. So now, if I'm playing two pitches, and then if I wanted those to glide, and how fast I want those to glide. And we could also put these so that we could just play, like as we play a pitch, I could play another pitch and not have it restart the sample. So you could do stuff like that when you activate the legato mode for the glide. But generally, MIDI notes are going to, if they're on top of each other, they will have to, they will have to, at that point, one note will cancel the other note out by nature of MIDI. Great. All right, so Mark Raven's getting new crossovers for speakers. All right. He's hoping that might fix the ghost in his studio. All right, so we see from George in Germany, it says, hi Greg, I accidentally changed the number of preset slots that are shown in the mixer. Can you quickly point me to where to set this up? I can't seem to find it anywhere, thanks. Okay, so I think it's maybe like if we're in an audio track and we have our inserts here. So there used to be, if you right click on the insert slot, we can see show all available insert slots. So we can see 16 inserts. So you could do that, and let's look at it in the mix console. So we go to our inserts here. So I think if we right click in like the insert slot, right click there, that you could see all 16 insert slots or just the number of insert slots that are needed to show the number of inserts available. So let me know if that's what you mean, George. All right, we see Recyclop says excellent. Thanks, Greg. Mix console snapshots was a new function for me, so learned something new today as well. All right. All right, so hang on, I think my chat may have disconnected. Maybe we lost a little. So let me just jump back and see if I could get the chat back. All right, I may have lost some questions. Sorry if I missed your question. Okay. Okay, so we see some questions here. All right. Okay. So all right, so Tireman Guitars asks, says, how do I see how much latency the plugins are adding? Is there a way? All right, so all you have to do to determine the amount of latency that's added by a plugin. So I'll just come over here. Let's just drag some track presets in. So I'll drag it over to this file. All right, so if we open up like the channel inspector here, you could right click and you can say set up sections. One of the sections would be latency. All right, so I'm going to add an insert or two that I know has a high latency on it. Okay, so right now I could see that with all of these plugins loaded that this is 300. And so you want to, if you're in 13, we could do this directly from the channel inspector. So we can see you could say set up sections and make sure that the latency is checked. And now we can see the total latency for all of these plugins on this track. And if we want to change those, what we could do is if we see which plugins and how much latency they're causing, we could just see right here all of the plugins that have latency. And if we're doing this in the large mix console, so we could now come over and we can see right above the channel. And again, you may need to set up the sections. So if we come over here, make sure that you have the channel latency checked. And then we could see right above the fader, we could see the latency of the channel path. And at this point, we could just see how much latency each plugin is causing. Another area to see like how much latency is involved in a plugin is if you go to your studio, to your VST plugin manager. So say if we select a plugin here, we can say, okay, let's go to our multiband envelope shaper. We go to get info, that we can see the latency in samples that plugin causes. So we go to our multiband compressor. You can see this is 5,634 samples. So we could just kind of look to see. So check out in the mix console, you can go to the latency settings or in the channel inspector. So if we click here, we can see the latency settings at the bottom as well. All right, so Tiago asks how to set sequential colors from tracks within a folder using the color from the folder as a reference color. All right, so let's give it a shot. All right, so I want to make these all the same color. So let's come over here. Let's put these in a folder. Okay, so let's say I want to use this color as my basis, so that's going to be the second color. So I think that if we come and I think I made a macro to do this as well, which I may have to pull out. So, but if we go to the project logical editor, so if we don't have tracks, what we could do, so let's say if I remove these tracks, if I don't have existing tracks, I could have a folder and then I could go to my preferences. And if we go to user interface and we go to track and mix console channel colors, that we could say we want to use previous track color +1. So now if I add like 8 audio tracks, the colors will be incremented. And then we could move those to the folder track. So you could do that. But if you wanted to, let's say if these are all the same color and you wanted to increment them, I think we made a macro. Let's see if we could get it to work. So maybe increment track colors. Okay, so maybe it's a process logical editor preset. Let's see. Let me just see if this was part of a macro that we did earlier. I'm sure you can find it on cubaseindex.com. Yeah, so I think if you do it, there's. I think I had made a macro once to do just that, but it might not have been within a folder. But let me just see if I could look through the. Yeah, I could see if I could look it up and maybe have the macro Tiago for you for Friday. But I remember doing one that kind of did it. So all right. All right, so you see Jazz Dude just mentioning about the projects. I did one for the project I was using for the CPU distributions. I did one one preset. Let me just that had a lot of stuff going on in it. So I'll just enable this particular track and show you the preset Jazz Dude if you want to see what it does on your system. But let's come over on enable this track. So the preset is a big FX pedal board. So that's the preset, and this has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you kind of have like 9, in addition to the delay, 8 other plugins. So see if you do that, see what happens if you do that across 16 channels, that one. So big FX pedal board. All right, so you see Forward Thinking says, thanks, Greg. It was indeed a Hallian Sonic GM percussion I originally used, but it somehow switched instrument to Groove Agent. All right, glad you got it figured out. All right. All right, we see Jay Hatchie asks, can I download the whole ISO for Cubase 13? My motherboard died, so I'm doing a whole new build with NVMe drives and starting from scratch. So if you go to the Steinberg Download Assistant, so we'll just pop over here, we'll see the Steinberg Download Assistant, and when you go to Cubase, so it's going to be kind of broken down, so it's not an ISO image because it's not really, you would need like 40 ISO images for it to fit, or a lot of ISO images. But what you can do is once you get to the Steinberg Download Assistant, and let's say we come over here to Cubase Pro 13. All you'd have to do, is just click on Install All, and that will install all of the different components for you, so you don't have to do it one by one. So you could do it individually, each of the components, each of the instruments, or just click on the Install All, and that will take care of it for you. So that will simplify the installation process on a new system for you. See, Tireman Guitar says, yeah, he just got the download assistant, worked fine. Everything works here. All right. All right. Back to when the live stream got restored, so glad it wasn't too long. Sorry about that. All right, so you see from Zenos Music, is there any way to be able to separate instrument parts relatively easy? So I'm not sure if you're separating it from like a full mix or what, but if you have like an entire like 2-track mix, what you can do is come over here. I'll just revert this quickly. And you could utilize Spectral Layers Pro. So here we're going to have our full mix. And then in the extensions, I have come over here to Spectral Layers and loaded that as my ARA extension. So now when I double click on the event, Spectral Layers is going to launch in the bottom zone. And then I just went from the modules to do an unmixed song. And now what I can do is So this way that way you could unmix the different elements of different songs. So let me know if that's kind of what you're looking to do, Zenos Music. All right, so you see from Zenos Music asks, it says, when we make a sketch on the piano, we play chords or use some ensemble patch, and would like to split our sketch so that the top note is in violin 1 and the next violin 2, etc., to the string section. All right, so let's say if I come here, all right, so I'll just make a quick chord track from this song. All right, so I'm going to add a chord track. Drag this to the chord track. All right, so we have this, and I'm going to add, let's say, maybe a piano type sound or Rhodes. So let's add a MIDI instrument. So we'll come over here to like maybe amped Electra. All right, so we have. All right, so I could drag. I'm going to come to my project menu, and let's say if we have just quick, I'm going to say chords to MIDI. So we have our MIDI part here laid out for us. And what we can do now is, if you go into the score editor, interestingly, there's a really cool function where you could say scores, and we could say under functions, explode. And we can say we want to add 3 new tracks, so add 1 less track and then hit OK. And then each of your tracks will be kind of isolated. So try going into the scores function, so the bass, depending on the frequencies and the chord voicings. But try the explode function. So once you go into the score editor, you'll see under functions, so scores, functions, and then explode, and that should split it to different tracks pretty easily. All right, so Tireman Guitars asks, can you show me how to get more colors available than the stock ones in the color menu? All right, so we're going to go to the project menu to project color setup. So right now I see I have 16 colors. So we'll come over here to presets and we'll say, okay, let's go to the number of colors. I'll choose from 16 to 32. And then we could also have the number of color tints that are available. So say let's just make 4 color tints. So now when we come over here, we go to choose a color. We can now see 128 colors. So once again, project menu to project color setup. Go to your presets and increase the number of basic colors plus the number of color tints, and that could give you 128 different colors very quickly. All right. All right, so we see, hi Greg, Jerry from Ballymena, Northern Ireland. Could you show me how to use QLink to link my pre-gains in Cubase 13? All right, let's take a look. All right, so we'll come over. Okay, so let's go to our pre area here, and we'll see our pre-gain. So I want to take these tracks, and so we'll have these tracks selected. Okay, so I'm going to activate QLink, and let's see if we could just come right over here into the pre area and adjust our gain. And we can see that all those channels gains are adjusting and linked together. So again, select the channels, activate QLink, or you can hold down Alt or Option plus Shift. That will temporarily activate QLink, and we could come right over here and adjust the gain for all, the pre-gain for all those selected channels to the same value. Okay, so we see QC from Flyv says QC stands for Focus Quick Controls. Yeah, if you want to ask your question again about that, please feel free to. Sorry about that. Okay. Wonderful to see Gerald Elion from Martinez, California. Thanks for joining us. All right, Cedric Hawkins asks, question, when I QLink tracks, I can make individual EQ moves that correspond on link tracks. However, if I choose an EQ preset, the changes do not. How can I remedy this? All right, so let's take a look. Okay, so we'll come over to our EQ changes. So let's say now I will come over here and adjust the EQ for one of the tracks. All right, so we do that, and we see that's applied to all the channels. So let me call up the channel EQ for one of these. Let's do a preset and see if that works. Yeah, it doesn't look like that works because it's probably not. But let's see if we load that EQ as an insert. I can see where, you know, since we loaded it in the particular channel settings, let me see. There's no. All right. Let me come over here and see if there's. All right. All right, let's see if we do channel strip presets, if that will make a difference. All right. Yeah, it's still different. But if we make the change here, then I think that, let's say if we go to band 2, I mean, I understand kind of the logic because we're loading up the preset in one and not the others. But let's also see if we come over here to our inserts. Let's see if we do it as inserts. So I'm going to select these tracks here. Let's get to my inserts and go to the Studio EQ, which would be the same. And we load up a preset here. Sorry, maybe just closed out accidentally. Okay, so we have that EQ preset. That didn't, let me just load up my Q-Link on all these. Yeah, it looks like it's just kind of loading up the parameters for that one plugin. I see where it seems like it should kind of work as expected, but I'll include that in a report. Thanks for pointing that out, Cedric. All right, so Val asks, what could be the reason Cubase doesn't find any license and won't start when trying to start safe mode? So are you starting Windows in safe mode or starting Cubase in safe mode? So let me know, if you could let me know that, Val, that'd be appreciated. Okay. All right, reading through comments. Okay, still reading through comments. All right. All right, we see Graham Witcher checking in from Oxford. Wish everyone had a great weekend. Right. All right, sorry, my chat field jumped. Just trying to navigate it. All right, so we see from Sean Kelly who asks, morning from Australia, Greg. Thanks for joining us from Australia in the middle of the night. Says, I've been wondering about the audio routing and the path my signal takes if I have inserts pre-post. Sends them bus to a group to master. Let's see. All right, so we'll start with that. Okay, so let's do a quick like routing test here. So do new project. All right, so we'll come over here. Let's add an audio track. All right, so, and let's say in this audio track, I'm just going to run a oscillator, like a signal tone generator. I'll turn the volume down. So we'll run this as an insert. So under tools. Okay, so we have the signal generator. So, and Sean's been warning about the audio routing path. My signal takes, if I have inserts, pre or post, sends, then bus to group and mastered. All right, so let's say, if we are going through our, let's say we have our signal coming in, and let's say we have inserts. Now our inserts we could set to pre or post fader. So if we want to come over here, let's put a let me switch this to like a noise. All right, and then I'm going to put in let's say a flanger, because we could always hear that easily. So we'll put our flanger in, and let's say we want our flanger to be, we'll right click here, and we're going to move it to a post fader slot. So if it was going to be and your post fader slots can be dynamically changed. So let's say I have this as my post fader slot, and now I adjust the panner. It's not going to really affect the panning level if I move this to my pre-fader. Like the amount of the effect isn't going to be altered by having that in when we're post fader. So if we send this track, or if we send this to a send effect, so if we send this to a send effect, and our signal, like if we have 16 inserts, the inserts are going to be processed serially. So the signal would go in here, would get processed in the second plugin, sent to the third, sent to the fourth, sent to the fifth. Now, if we send it to a group channel or an effects channel, so let's add a group channel, and let's add an effects channel. All right, so now we have a group and an effects channel. So we can take this particular channel, and when we use sends won't be serial. They'll be parallel in nature, so that when we send it to my effects modulator, it going to the send effect or going to a group is independent. So when we come here, we could just come, and these paths will take these 16 channels, these 16 insert effects, and then it could send it out to different destinations. These destinations will often be fed into, we can see right here, like our full signal path. So we could take this audio track is coming from this stereo in, it's going through these processes through the channel strip. It's then these sends are going out, and we can see our audio fader here. This is going out to my group. And we could have this automatically, and we see two targets. So we can say, okay, I want to see my effects channel. And then we could have that effects channel or group channel automatically going to the master stereo outs. So you can kind of envision it a little bit if you click on this icon right here, and then you could kind of choose the different signal paths to envision where the signal is going. All right. See JVI, just apologizing for his absence in the last meeting. His main computer died. Sorry to hear that. We're happy to have you back. All right. All right, so we have a question from Tireman Guitars. Is there a way to set the mixer up so that you have wave files showing instead of meters? I had to set up in Cubase 8. Don't know if it's possible in Cubase 13. Yeah, so there's, so when you go to the meters at the top, so let's go to this project here. All right, so now we'll open up our main mixer. And let's make sure that we have kind of our meter area. So we'll have our meter bridge at the top here. All right, and I'll make this less annoyingly big, but if you right click into meters, you want to switch it from PPM to wave, and all your audio tracks will now show the waveform of the audio file that's being fed right into, so we can see, now we see the guitars and bass. So you could actually get an idea of what's coming up, where events are happening before they happen right there. So we can see snare here, or hi-hat. So again, in the meter bridge area, if you don't see the meter bridge, you could go to the setup sections and just make sure you have the meter bridge turned on, right click, and then choose to switch it from PPM or like to wave meters right there. All right, so we see Tiago says, hi Greg, not sure if you read my question about copying multiple automation lanes to another track. I have several plug-in automations in my stereo out and want to copy to another track. So I think we did it, but just in case it was when the live stream went down for a little bit, we'll do it again. So let's say I want to add a folder track here, or a group track rather. Okay, so let's say in my group I have volume, and let's say mute automation. So I'll come, and we have this in our input outputs. I'll just grab the group channel and we'll move it here. So we can see that we're going to have our group channel. Let's go to our master section, and let's say, okay, we're going to have our automation lanes here. So here I'll just say volume. All right, we have volume already indicated there. Let's say our mute. Okay, so let's say we have volume and mute. Okay, so I want to take this volume automation. So I want to select all of these events, copy. Let me select the events here. Copy. Let's go to the group, and here we want it to be our volume automation, or we'll just go to the group here. Select our group. And I'll Alt V, and then we could have, and then enable the automation. So let's say I want to go to my mutes here. I can select all events, copy, and then when we go to our mute here, we could just paste. So it kind of has to be manually done. I don't think that we could do 2 lanes at a time, but let's say if I come here, I'll select those. And now if I want to go to my pre-group, oh, yeah, you can. So, but you just have to make sure that these are in the same order. So again, you could just select, make sure that the order of like volume and mute is here, copy. And then we could select these particular tracks, and I will do Alt V, which will paste at origin, and then you could just make sure that the automation is So just make sure that they're the same values, and then you could select multiple lanes, copy and paste it to multiple lanes on a different group track. All right. All right, so we see Sean Kelly. He just says, see, does the signal go through insert 1, insert 2 effects after that processing? Then all of it goes to the first send, and all that goes to the second send, and the post insert process is first. So, like when you're looking at it again, so these inserts would all go sequentially, so in series. So this, so if we put a delay here, we put a flanger, the flanger is going to be processing the delay. And if we put a reverb after that, the reverb is processing the delays that are flanged, and now they're applied reverb. But when we're going to send, these aren't going to go in order. They go in parallel out, so that the resulting sound of all the inserts is now sent out of the sends. All right, so timing guitars. Do you need to use an M-chip processor to use Spectral Layers? I don't think so. I'll just confirm to see. I'm almost sure it would work on a... We'll look at the minimum... All right, so Spectral Layers. So it says Apple Silicon CPU recommended, but that would mean that it's would still be compatible with an Intel chip. But it would work better with an Apple Silicon processor. Okay, Michael Graybill asks, something I find myself wishing for all the time. Is there a way to apply soft quantize to the ends of MIDI note events? Use it 95% of the time for starts in orchestra, manually doing ends though. All right, so let's take a quick look. All right, so let me just take the ends of notes here, and I'll just... Okay, so we're going to take these notes and all their... I think that the... Okay, so if I have soft quantize here, let's say we'll quantize the ends of the notes. It looks like it went. Let's see if we do. Now my mouse has lost its connection. Let me see if I can need to charge it. Hang on. Great. I'm going to see if I could get my Cubase back up here. Bear with me. Okay, so. All right, so getting my Cubase booted, and we'll see if we can, I think I'm. All right, I'm going to. All right, so I'm going to go quickly to. Open up a quick project here. Okay, so let's see, Michael Teams, hearing it okay. Okay, so I know we had a question about, let's see if we get a couple of the questions that were mailed in. Okay, so we had a question on, I have a song in Wavelab with markers. I'd like to get the song and its markers into Nuendo. I tried exporting the song with markers from Wavelab, then importing the resulting WAV file into Nuendo, but the markers didn't make themselves magically present. So usually like the markers that are embedded in the WAV file aren't read by Cubase or Nuendo. I'm not sure if there's a particular reason why, but they're the like internal markers, sometimes they can be of varying, types of metadata, but they're not always interpreted inside of Cubase or Nuendo. And then we had our question was about, it says, refer to a function where your sample follows a tempo of Cubase, but I wanted the other way around. It says, does Cubase have an option to have the audio file, like the tempo of the audio file, carried over so that it could actually work with different tempo changes to make something fit? So let me just open up a quick project here. So the concept is if the audio file has varying tempos, and I guess our programs could take the tempo map and kind of embed it on the file, which may not work if you change sample rates or do editing on a particular file, change it. So let's go ahead and take a quick look and how we could approach this in Cubase. Okay, so we have a file that that has varying tempo, which is pretty typical for like a live recording. All right. So we can see that this file isn't necessarily complying with the tempo. So as soon as if I want that to follow the tempo, what I can do is just an actual tempo detection. So you see, we'll just analyze, and our tempo is done. So we could find kind of where our downbeat is. So we'll say it's kind of, we'll close this out. So now that we have the tempo extracted, we could grab like a drum loop. And then once we have like a drum loop, if we want the drum loop to now vary in tempo, all I'd have to do is we could drop it on the timeline. I'll come right over here. Let's drag that. I'm going to make sure that it's in musical mode. And now this drum loop is going to magically follow the tempo based on the other file. All right, next question we had was, so again, just select the file, do a tempo detection, and then that way if you do edits on the file itself, then the tempo map is associated with the particular file right there. Another quick question, how do you import AAF into Nuendo? It's going to be the same in Cubase and Nuendo. You would just come over here and say import audio file, or you go to the import menu and just choose your AAF file, and then you could just import that file right into your project. So again, file menu to import, and then choose AAF. Okay, next question we had, clear my throat. I do lots of orchestral MIDI work, and a lot of the time I want to layer the same exact MIDI part on multiple different instrument parts, whether to layer different sample libraries or have a synth to support it. Other DAWs have things like stacks where one MIDI block can control multiple instruments without a limit to track numbers. Is there a way in Cubase to do this? All right, so let's say we want to take these MIDI events here. So I have this instrument and it's layered. So let's say these three instruments are layered together. So one way of kind of doing this is just to kind of take these particular events, and we can add a MIDI track. So let's just add one MIDI track, and then we could go to what we call sends. So we'll go to, on the MIDI track, we'll see MIDI sends. I could come over here, let's activate send. So I want this to go to, we'll say, okay, we're going to send this to Retrolog. We're going to send the next send here to Halley and Sonic, and the third one to Pad Shop. I'm going to activate the send here, and then one MIDI track that I will come over here and record on. So we'll just solo this particular MIDI track. So, and I place this track and record. So I arm the MIDI track here. So one. So you could do it like that. Now another approach could be, instead of using the MIDI sends, is just to come over here. Let's remove this selected track, and I could place all of these into a folder. So I'm going to take all of these tracks. Let's put these into a folder, because you always still want the capability of being able to mix and process independently. So I'm going to come over here and we'll move the selected tracks to a new folder. And then what I could do is I could just record enable the folder, and I could keep the folder closed. And as I record, so now we'll make sure that all of these are set. So again, I could record now, even with the folder closed. So I'll just take record off. And now we could just have all of the tracks recorded. So we could have, hundreds of tracks recorded into one folder and record on them simultaneously and edit them independently. So two different approaches. All right, so we had a question of if someone takes advantage of the Nuendo upgrade, the cross-grade promotion now, and they have a Cubase license, they cross-grade it to Nuendo, and they have Cubase and Nuendo licenses. If going forward, if they have to update each of those independently to be current. So the question would be yes, if you wanted to keep current, but realize that So your Cubase license and your Nuendo license can be updated independently. So updating one doesn't necessarily update the other license. But one thing to be aware of is when you're doing that is, your Nuendo features will have all the Cubase features. So you may not have to update the Cubase version because all that functionality would be in the same version number of Nuendo as well. All right, so we have just a quick question. What is the approved, most effective way to report Cubase bugs? And so usually, the development team and people will keep an eye on the Steinberg forums. You could always request if you run into issues to me, and I'll pass it along as well. I know that the staff at Steinberg will read, they go through all of the live stream questions. Also, next question, what is the best way to make feature requests? And so there is an official area on the Steinberg forums where you could submit feature requests there. All right, let me see. I know we're roughly out of time. I'm sorry for that we had different technical issues with connections and stuff today. But I think that we are roughly out of time. Let me just check, see if there's any last minute quick questions. All right. Yeah. It's always, I'll be back Friday to my home where I usually do live streams. All right. All right, we should have a kind of stable internet connection. All right. All right, so with that, I guess we will go ahead and wrap up. I want to thank everyone for checking out the live stream and learning more about Steinberg products today. And we will be back on Friday for another live stream starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. And if you have any questions, please, you can send them in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. And I thank everyone for taking part of your day, morning, evening, or middle of the night to learn more about Steinberg products. And I want everyone to please stay safe and healthy, and we'll be back on Friday. Thank you very much. Goodbye.